I watched my brother Michael walk away with keys that glittered under the chandelier light and keys to a sprawling Dallas mansion, polished wood floors, a pool that sparkled like liquid glass. My inheritance. A dented metal toolbox with rusted hinges and a yellowing deed to a collapsing brick workshop in the middle of nowhere, New Mexico. One brother crowned with glory, the other shoved into shadows. And in that moment, staring at the dust-stained box, I felt something inside me fracture. My name is Lucas Douglas, 42 years old, a mechanic who fixes other people's engines while barely keeping my own life from stalling. I've spent most of my years bent over machines in a cramped garage on the outskirts of Fort Worth, earning enough to scrape by, but never enough to shine. Michael, meanwhile, wears tailored suits, shakes hands with oil executives, and carries the weight of my father's pride like a badge. I've always been the son who didn't measure up. The night of the will reading the air inside my parents' ranch house was thick, as if the very walls were holding their breath. The long oak table, where we had once shared meals of roast beef and cornbread, now felt like a courtroom. My father sat at the head, stone-faced my mother beside him, with trembling hands around her teacup. Michael leaned back in his chair, confident, smug, like he already knew the verdict. When the papers were signed, when the numbers were read aloud, my chest burned. $3.5 million from selling our horse ranch. A lifetime of sweat, dirt, and broken backs converted into cash. Michael received the crown jewel, a luxurious estate in Dallas. My father slid the envelope across the table as if passing him the throne. Michael smiled wide, his teeth flashing like a victory flag. Then came my turn. My father bent down, pulled out the battered toolbox, and dropped it in front of me with a hollow thud. Tools caked in rust handles, worn smooth from decades of use. On top, a folded deed to a forgotten workshop, its roof sagging, its walls crawling with weeds. "That's it?" I asked, my voice raw. My father's gaze hardened, his words cutting sharper than any blade. "Do something with it. If you're a man, you'll make it matter." Michael chuckled under his breath. "A shed in New Mexico. Maybe you can turn it into a doghouse, little brother." The room blurred. My mother's hand reached for mine under the table, soft, trembling, but I pulled away. The humiliation scalded hotter than any Texas sun. I wanted to shout, to curse, to demand why my brother was given a palace while I was handed scraps. But my voice froze in my throat. That night, as I drove away from the ranch with the rusty box rattling in the back seat, I felt the weight of it pressing against me heavier than any inheritance could be. I didn't know then that inside that worthless workshop waited something that would rip open every secret my family had tried to bury. Driving away from the ranch that night, the rattling of that rusted toolbox in the back of my truck pulled me backward in time. Every clank echoed like a reminder of the years I had spent trying, failing, and silently begging for recognition. The road blurred, and all I could see was the boy I used to be. I was never built like Michael. He grew tall, fast, broad shoulders that made my father proud muscles carved from hauling hay and breaking in horses. By the time he was 16, he could ride bareback rope cattle and wrestle a steer like it was nothing. Father would slap his back, his voice booming, "That's my son. That's how a man should look." And me, I was smaller, quieter, my arms thin as fence posts. I preferred books to saddles, engines to bridles. While Michael thundered across the fields, I sat in the barn with grease on my hands, tinkering with broken radios and busted tractors, trying to make them breathe again. To my father, that wasn't man's work. That was weakness. The memory of those mornings still stings. Sunrise spilling across the Texas sky, my father barking orders from the porch, coffee mug in hand, like a general leading troops. Michael would hoist a hay bale on each shoulder, grinning sweat shining like a medal. I would stumble with half the weight, my knees shaking dust, choking my throat. And always, always my father's silence. Not anger, not praise. Just silence. The kind that tells you you're invisible. My mother Helen tried to soften the blows. She'd slip me biscuits with honey before chores, whispering, "Your father sees more than he lets on." But I never believed her. The truth was written in the lines of his face every time he looked at Michael, and every time he looked through me. There was one person, though, who never looked through me. My little sister Emma. She was 5 years younger, with a quiet strength that no one seemed to notice. While Michael basked in attention, Emma would sneak into the barn, sit beside me as I pieced together old carburetors, her eyes wide with curiosity. She never mocked me, never compared me. She'd say things like, "One day, Lucas, people will see what I see." But Emma had no voice in that house. She was the youngest, the overlooked girl in a family where men carried the legacy, and women poured the tea. Her words stayed in the shadows, like mine. As the years rolled on, Michael left for Dallas, chasing business deals and flashing success, while I stayed behind, patching fences, fixing tractors, holding together the remnants of a ranch that was never truly mine. And through it all, the distance between me and my father grew wider, carved deeper by every unspoken disappointment. So when that battered box landed in front of me at the will reading, it wasn't just tools and a deed I saw. It was the sum of every silence, every insult, every time I had been measured and found lacking. And somewhere inside me, a part that had been buried since childhood stirred awake, whispering that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end of my story. The memories of my childhood clung to me like dust on my boots as I crossed the desert highway toward New Mexico. Every mile I drove, the weight of that toolbox rattling in the back felt heavier, like it carried not just rusted metal, but years of shame. My old pickup groaned against the wind headlights, slicing through endless stretches of nothing. I kept asking myself why I was even doing this. Maybe I wanted to prove my father wrong. Maybe I just wanted to see how low his expectations of me truly went. By the time I reached the property, the sun was sinking bleeding orange light across the jagged horizon. And there it was, my inheritance. The old brick workshop sat like a dying animal, its roof sagging windows, cracked weeds crawling up the sides, as if nature itself wanted to bury it. I stood by the truck, fists clenched, staring at the pathetic sight. "This is what my life is worth," I muttered to the empty desert air. The anger rose sharp and hot. I wanted to burn it down, to erase the insult, to watch flames devour every board until there was nothing left but ash. My hand went to the glove box, where a book of matches sat waiting. For a moment, the thought of fire felt righteous, like a cleansing. "Thinking of tearing it down, are you?" The voice startled me. I turned to see an old man leaning against a weathered fence post a few yards away. His hat was pulled low, his face lined like cracked earth. He walked toward me with the slow, deliberate steps of someone who'd seen too many years under this sun. "Name's Samuel," he said, extending a hand roughened by time. "Used to work here when it was still standing proud." I hesitated before shaking it. His grip was firm grounding. "Doesn't look like much now," I said bitterly. Samuel's eyes flicked to the workshop, narrowing. It was never just bricks and mortar. Strange things went on here, son. Men coming and going at night. Trucks that didn't belong. We never asked questions back then. Asking questions could get you hurt. A chill slid down my spine, despite the desert heat. "What are you saying?" He shrugged, but his gaze lingered on the crumbling walls. I'm saying a place like that doesn't die for no reason. If your daddy left it to you, maybe he knew it was more than it seems." His words rattled me. All at once, my anger twisted into something else, uneasy curiosity. I looked back at the sagging roof, the broken windows, and for the first time I wondered if destroying it would erase not just my shame, but a truth I wasn't ready to face. As Samuel tipped his hat and walked away into the dusk, I stood frozen, the desert wind tugging at my shirt. The matchbook felt heavier in my pocket now. For the first time since the will reading, I wasn't sure if I wanted the shed gone, or if I needed to know what it was hiding. I couldn't shake Samuel's words as I stood staring at the broken shell of that workshop. The matchbook burned in my pocket, but something else burned hotter curiosity. I pushed open the rusted door, and the hinges screamed like they hadn't moved in decades. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the sour smell of mold. Sunlight leaked through holes in the roof, painting the floor in jagged stripes. I walked across the warped boards, each step groaning under my boots. My anger was still there, bubbling, ready to explode. I picked up a crowbar from the old toolbox, my hands trembling. I swung it against the wall, not with purpose, but with rage. Wood, splintered dust filled the air, and then I heard it, a hollow echo. I froze. The wall didn't sound solid. I tapped again, softer this time. The sound was wrong, like knocking on an empty coffin. My pulse quickened. I ran my hand over the boards, feeling for seams. The air around me felt heavier, the silence louder. I wedged the crowbar into a crack and heaved. The wood shrieked as it gave way. Behind the splinters, darkness yawned. I widened the gap until I could crawl through. My flashlight beam cut across the void, and I stopped breathing. Metal crates stacked against the wall, their surfaces scarred but sealed tight. A dented trunk with brass latches. Piles of envelopes marked with red stamps, confidential. I knelt my knees, pressing into cold dirt, and reached for one envelope. Inside were yellowing papers stamped with government seals, maps with coordinates, shipping manifests, dates stretching back decades. I shoved them back, heart pounding, and moved to the trunk. The brass latches snapped open with a metallic pop. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was a handgun too clean, too deliberate to be forgotten here. Another bundle revealed blueprints, diagrams of equipment. I couldn't recognize lines of technical writing that meant nothing to me, but screamed danger. My throat went dry. This wasn't junk. This was hidden, buried. My father hadn't given me a workshop. He'd given me a vault. And then I felt it. The prickling at the back of my neck. The kind you feel when you're not alone. Slowly, I turned. Through a crack in the boarded window, I caught the faintest glint, like light bouncing off glass. Someone was out there, watching. I killed my flashlight, crouched in the shadows, my chest tight. The silence outside pressed in, broken only by the distant rustle of weeds in the wind. I waited, every nerve strung taut, listening for footsteps. None came. But the sense of being hunted lingered cold and certain. I backed out of the hidden spaceboards, creaking under my weight. My hands shook as I shoved the crowbar back into the box. Whoever was out there had seen me go in. Had they seen what I'd found? I stepped into the fading evening light, scanning the horizon. Empty fields, distant hills. But I knew I wasn't alone. The shed no longer felt like an insult. It felt like a trap. And I was standing dead center. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I shut my eyes, I saw the crates, the gun, the stamped files, and the flicker of glass outside the window. Someone had been watching. Someone knew. The shed wasn't just a burden anymore. It was a fuse waiting to be lit. In my panic, I did what I had always done when life backed me into a corner I called Michael. My voice cracked as I told him what I'd found, my words tumbling out in a rush. The crates, the trunk, the documents. There was a pause on the other end, long enough for my stomach to knot. Then came his laugh, low, greedy, almost delighted. "You're telling me you stumbled onto a gold mine and your first thought is fear? Lucas, don't be pathetic. This is our chance." "Our chance," I whispered. "Keep your mouth shut," Michael pressed. "Don't breathe a word to anyone. We can move those crates quietly. Sell them to the right buyers. You have no idea what people would pay for government goods that never saw the light of day." My hands trembled around the phone. "These aren't antiques, Michael. They look dangerous. This could destroy us." "Dangerous," he scoffed. "That's just another word for valuable. You've been waiting your whole life for something to prove you're worth more than a busted wrench. Well, here it is. Don't blow it." His words sank like poison. For years I'd wanted to prove myself, to rise out of the shadow he cast. And now he was twisting that old wound, daring me to finally step up his way. When I hung up, the silence was unbearable. I stepped outside, the desert air cool against my skin, and found Emma's number glowing on my phone. I hadn't planned to tell her, but the words spilled out anyway. She didn't laugh. She didn't mock. Her voice, soft but steady, cut through my panic. "Lucas, don't trust Michael. He's never seen beyond himself. If you listen to him, you'll drown right alongside him. Please don't carry this alone. Do the right thing." I wanted to believe her. God, I did. But the right thing wasn't so clear. The next day, Samuel found me sitting by the shed, staring at the boards like they might speak. He leaned on his cane, his eyes sharp. "You found it, didn't you?" I stiffened, found what he didn't flinch. Back in the 70s, men came through here at night. Strange trucks, foreign accents, no paperwork. We all kept quiet because men who asked questions had a way of disappearing. I always suspected this place was more than a workshop. Now I know. My stomach twisted. The pieces clicked together. Michael's hunger, Emma's warning, Samuel's shadowed memory. This wasn't just an inheritance, it was a powder keg. I stood at the crossroads of my life, hide it, sell it, or call the authorities. Every path led to risk. One might make me rich, another might keep me safe, and the last might finally set me free. I sat in my truck all night, staring at the shed as if it were alive, breathing secrets into the desert air. My phone weighed in my hand like a loaded gun. Michael's voice still echoed goldmine. "Keep quiet. Don't be pathetic." Emma's words fought back. "Do the right thing." Samuel's warning haunted me. Men disappearing for asking questions. My heart thudded like it wanted out of my chest. I knew then, if I stayed silent, I'd be swallowed whole just like that shed was trying to swallow me. With trembling fingers, I dialed a number I never thought I'd use. The FBI field office in Albuquerque. After what felt like a dozen transfers, a calm, clipped voice came through. "Special Agent Collins. What exactly did you find?" I told him everything. The crates, the files, the trunk. The feeling that I wasn't alone. My words tumbled out jagged and shaky. He didn't interrupt, didn't scoff. Just listened. Then he said firmly, "Do not touch anything else. Stay where you are. We're sending a team." The line went dead. My body sagged against the steering wheel. For the first time, I felt the weight shift. It wasn't just mine anymore. But fear bled in to fill the space. A team. This was bigger than I could even imagine. By dawn, the dirt road trembled under the tires of black SUVs. Dust swirled as men in dark jackets stepped out, weapons, slung eyes sharp. They moved like a machine, efficient and unshakable. Collins was taller than I expected, square jaw eyes that cut right through me. "You're Lucas Douglas?" "Yes," I croaked. "Show us." I led them inside my boots, dragging my chest tight. The shed that had been my humiliation was now crawling with federal agents' cameras flashing, evidence bags snapping open. They peeled away the boards like surgeons exposing bone. Each crate cataloged, each envelope sealed, each weapon photographed under cold light. Collins studied the files, his face unreadable. Then he turned to me. "These materials shouldn't exist outside secure facilities. What you uncovered ties to a Cold War smuggling network long thought, buried." The words knocked the breath from me. Cold War. Smuggling. My shed wasn't just a forgotten relic. It was a time capsule of crime hidden under my family's nose for decades. Then it happened. A shout from outside. Agents swarmed the perimeter, weapons drawn. I stumbled to the door, my stomach dropping. Across the field, a figure broke from the brush, tall, quick, desperate. The glint of glass I'd seen before now, attached to binoculars swinging at his chest. The agents moved fast, tackling him to the ground. His muffled curses carried on the wind as they dragged him up in cuffs. Collins's eyes met mine. "You weren't imagining it. Someone was watching. And if you hadn't called us, you'd be on your own against men like him." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. For once in my life, I hadn't run, hadn't bowed, hadn't stayed silent. I had chosen to speak. And in that moment, standing in the dust with the FBI at my side, I realized I'd stepped into a world far more dangerous than my father's scorn or my brother's mockery. And there was no turning back. The dust from the FBI's SUVs had barely settled when I knew I couldn't avoid it any longer. I had to face my family. Driving back to Texas, every mile was heavy with dread. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, not from fear of strangers in the desert anymore, but from the confrontation waiting at the ranch house. When I walked in, the air inside felt as thick as the night of the will reading. My father leaned against the kitchen counter, his arms crossed, his jaw like stone. My mother sat at the table, her tea untouched, eyes darting between us, as if she could hold the family together with sheer will. Michael was already there, pacing, his face red, his eyes wild. Emma sat quietly in the corner, her hands folded, her gaze steady on me. My father's voice broke the silence. The agents called. They asked if I'd ever seen anything suspicious on that property. His eyes narrowed. "Did you know what you were walking into?" I dropped my keys on the table with a clatter. "Did you?" He didn't answer right away. His jaw tightened. Finally, he said, "I bought that land cheap decades ago. Too cheap. I suspected there was a reason, but I never looked inside that workshop. Figured if it was rotten, it could be torn down someday." The anger in me flared hot. "You handed me a trap and called it a test. Do something with it, you said. You didn't give me a chance. You gave me a burden you didn't want to carry yourself." Before my father could respond, Michael exploded. "Do you have any idea what you threw away?" he shouted, stepping toward me. "We could have been rich. You called the feds like some scared kid instead of handling it like a man." I clenched my fists, the old reflex of swallowing his insults clawing at me. But before I could speak, Emma stood. For the first time in years, her voice cut through the room, sharp and unwavering. "No, Michael. He did what you never could. He made the right choice." Michael's head snapped toward her, stunned. Emma rarely spoke up, never against him. "You've always thought being a man meant chasing money, power, recognition," she continued, her voice trembling with fire. but Lucas had the courage to do what was right, even when it scared him. That's strength, not greed, not arrogance. Strength. The room fell into stunned silence. My mother's eyes filled with tears. My father's gaze flickered just for a second with something I couldn't name respect, maybe, or regret. Michael's face twisted, caught between fury and disbelief. The weight of years of silence cracked in that moment. The division in our family lay bare, every wound exposed. But for once, I wasn't the quiet one in the corner. I stood straighter, meeting Michael's glare without flinching, my sister's words echoing in the air like a shield. And for the first time, I felt like I wasn't the overlooked son anymore. The silence after Emma's words still rang in my ears as I stepped back outside. The Texas night was heavy stars scattered across the sky like distant witnesses. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a call from Agent Collins. "We've finished cataloging the materials," he said, his voice steady. "I need you to understand something, Lucas. If you hadn't called, if you'd tried to move or sell what was in that shed, you'd be dead or hunted by now. You didn't just report something. You chose a side, the right side. You likely saved lives." I stood there leaning against the porch railing, the cool wood pressing into my back. Saved lives. Those words didn't sound like they belonged to me, the overlooked son, the boy who could never lift as much hay as his brother. And yet for the first time, I believed them. The days that followed blurred into questions, reports, signatures, and debriefings. The FBI combed through every crate, every file, unraveling threads of a smuggling network buried since the Cold War. Collins checked in more than once, his sharp gaze softening each time he spoke to me. He didn't see a failure. He saw someone who had chosen courage over silence. Michael didn't see it that way. He stormed out of the house, his voice echoing through the halls as he cursed my name. "You ruined everything," he shouted, slamming the door behind him. I watched his taillights disappear down the dirt road, anger and bitterness trailing in the dust. For once, I didn't chase after him. My father said little. He lingered in the kitchen, quiet, unreadable. But when our eyes met, there was no contempt this time. Just something heavier, something reluctant acknowledgement. He didn't praise me, not outright. But his silence was different now. It wasn't the silence of dismissal. It was the silence of a man who finally saw me. Through it all, Emma never left my side. She was the voice I had needed for decades, steady and clear. "You've carried their shadows long enough," she told me one evening as we sat on the porch, watching the sun sink behind the fields. "Now you get to stand in your own light." And Samuel, the old neighbor, tipped his hat when he passed by the next week. "Told you it wasn't just bricks and mortar," he said with a knowing grin. For once, his words didn't feel like a warning. They felt like validation. The workshop in New Mexico is empty now, stripped of its secrets, nothing but bare walls and a sagging roof. But I chose not to tear it down. It stands as a reminder of who I was when I arrived. Angry, bitter, desperate, and who I became when I left. I used to believe my inheritance was an insult, a punishment. But the truth is, it was a gift in disguise, a burden that forced me to find my backbone, my courage, my freedom. Sometimes the weight we're handed isn't meant to crush us. Sometimes it's meant to show us we were stronger than we ever knew. This story touched me deeply, and I'd love to hear how it made you feel. Did it remind you of anything in your own family? Share your thoughts in the comments, and let us know where you're watching from. I'm always amazed by the places our community comes together. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to Domestic Tragedy for more powerful stories that deserve to be heard.